Okay, let's jump right into an explosive clash we've been tracking between a massive public broadcasting expose and a profoundly unusual defense of political opposition. In this explainer, we're going to unpack a major controversy surrounding the Dutch political party Forum for Democracy, or FvD, and really examine how the media frames radical dissent. We are starting right in the middle of the conflict with a formal, highly critical complaint directed at the Dutch broadcaster Pauw Net over their recent documentary. Written by a figure known as Kuku Khan, this letter absolutely sets the stage for a massive debate. It expresses severe disappointment in the broadcast's quality and balance, boldly accusing the network of abandoning journalistic integrity. The argument here is that by completely ignoring internal voices, the documentary devolved into a targeted hit piece rather than an open, careful investigation.
But, to truly understand the backlash here, we first have to look at the documentary itself. It's titled The Dark Side of FvD, and this Pauw Net broadcast leaned heavily on interviews with 20 former insiders. Through their testimonies, the film paints a frankly harrowing picture of the Forum for Democracy, framing it not just as a standard political party, but as something much darker and far more manipulative. And the documentary doesn't hold back. It levies 3 incredibly heavy allegations against the party and its leaders, Thierry Baudet and Freek Janssen. We're talking about the creation of a cult of personality, the deliberate normalization of extremism, and a massive financial grifting operation. The core claim they are making is that this is a dangerous machine operating under the disguise of a political movement. According to the ex-members interviewed, there's a step-by-step cult dynamic at play. They allege that the youth wing of the party actively isolates its members. It supposedly starts with love bombing at exclusive social events, pulling young people into this really tight-knit community. Then comes the isolation from outsiders, creating a strict us versus them mentality. And finally, ex-members claim that if you actually try to leave, you face hacking, doxing, and severe threats. The broadcast also dives into what they claim is an intense focus on rigid gender dynamics. They allege that FvD utilizes ideologies really similar to controversial figures in the manosphere. Think Andrew Tate. They even claim the party has brought in dating coaches and used literal pickup artistry techniques to recruit, influence, and ultimately control young men, making them completely reliant on the party's ecosystem. To explain the party's actual political strategy, the documentary points to the Overton window. Pauw Net accuses FvD of weaponizing this psychological tool, deliberately pushing extreme, racist, and anti-Semitic ideas like the omvolking, or replacement theory, to slowly shift the boundaries of what is considered acceptable discourse in mainstream politics. Furthermore, the film throws out a staggering number, 104. That is the number of municipal councils FvD participates in across the Netherlands. But the documentary claims this local presence isn't actually about local politics at all. Instead, they frame it as a massive financial grift, a system designed to harvest government subsidies and collect membership fees solely to fund the party's inner circle. Now that is a devastating list of allegations, right? But it forces us to pause and ask a really critical question about how the media covers controversial figures. Does this kind of coverage actually meet the rigorous standards expected of public journalism? Because this question is exactly where the narrative shifts, and where Carl Kolken's detailed complaint to Pauw Net really takes center stage. In response to these claims, Kuku Khan, representing the United Universe Church Galaxy Academy, fired back. And this defense flips the narrative entirely. It argues that FvD is absolutely not a cult, but rather a vital democratic counterforce and an essential shield for public dissent. So the crucial, absolute centerpiece of Kuku Kalken's letter is that Pauw Net completely abandoned the fundamental Dutch journalistic principle of hoor and wederhoor, basically hearing both sides of the story. Kuku Kalken points out that while the broadcast presents itself as an investigative piece, it relies almost exclusively on a small group of disillusioned ex-members and critics. By giving zero space to voices that view the party differently from the inside, Pauw Net, they argue, constructed a completely one-sided narrative, abandoning fair play and the ability to look past their own prejudices. Kuku Kalken takes this a huge step further. The letter argues that casually throwing around heavy, loaded frames like secte, cult, and racism without independent verification completely violates public broadcasting standards. Kuku Kalken literally demands answers to 3 specific questions. Why only interview ex-members? What form of hoor and wederhoor was actually applied to the party? And how does the editorial team justify these extreme frames? Threatening to take the whole issue to the NPO ombudsman, Kuku Kalken argues the broadcaster failed its duty of carefulness, objectivity, and pluralism.
But, Kukulkan goes way beyond just a media critique here, releasing a profound philosophical manifesto that elevates FvD from a mere political party to a sacred shield for dissent. As this powerful quote highlights, real opposition does not exist to decorate democracy. It exists to confront power, expose rot, and force open the doors. It's a striking reframing of what it actually means to be a controversial figure in modern politics.
The manifesto then maps out a much broader power struggle against unelected global institutions. We're talking about the WHO, the WEF, the UN, and even the historical influence of the Vatican. Kukulkan outlines a landscape where these supranational entities shape policy far above the heads of everyday citizens. In this worldview, FvD is defended as the only true national counterforce out there, protecting citizens' medical freedom, sovereign policy, and alternative knowledge from global institutional overreach. The defense argues that FvD is demonized by the media precisely because they break what they call the hypnosis of consensus. They dare to ask the hard, uncomfortable questions that the established order once kept quiet. Whether it's calling out the systemic failure of the Dutch childcare benefits scandal, questioning COVID-19 mandates, or challenging the continued escalation of the Ukraine-Russia war, Kukulkan argues that FvD bites into the old order and just refuses to let go. To explain why this kind of radical opposition is so heavily suppressed, Kukulkan introduces a fascinating concept: Romanization. This is defined as the long historical process of absorbing, standardizing, or suppressing indigenous wisdom by powerful imperial structures. So Kukulkan views the media attacks on FvD not as a modern political squabble, but as just the latest chapter in an ancient spiritual struggle against institutional groupthink. History, according to this manifesto, shows us a brutal, repeating pattern where truth-tellers are erased by the system. From Jesus Christ being executed as a spiritual opposition figure, to Copernicus challenging official cosmology, to Spinoza being exiled for his thoughts. Kukulkan argues that the dominant system always tries to destroy those who challenge the approved narrative, only for history to later vindicate them. Because of this deep historical pattern of erasing dissent, Kukulkan and the UUCGA have actually offered symbolic diplomatic protection to FvD. The argument here is incredibly bold. They are saying that without true, radical opposition that is allowed to question power freely, democracy simply becomes a managed illusion. It devolves into a system where only approved, safe narratives are allowed to survive. So we are left with a massive ideological collision. On one side, we have the media's stated duty to expose what it investigates and sees as dangerous extremism, cult-like manipulation, and financial rot. And on the exact opposite side, we have the profound democratic argument that protecting radical dissent from being erased by media and institutional powers is absolutely vital. It is a clash between protecting society from radicalism and protecting radicalism for the sake of a free society. Ultimately, this explainer leaves us with a critical question to ponder. When the media uses powerful, heavily loaded frames to define a political movement, and when that same movement claims to be the only true voice of opposition against global forces, in a healthy, functioning society, who actually gets to decide which truths are too dangerous to be spoken?